Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our 2024 webinar series kickoff, Housing Revitalization in the City of Euclid with APA Ohio's Cleveland section. My name is Patrick Hewitt. I am the Section Vice Director for Professional Development, and we are very excited to have folks here today to learn more about the City of Euclid's housing efforts. A couple items of housekeeping as people continue to come into the room. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll be reserving some time at the end for folks to ask questions and for us to answer them. Please go ahead and use that Q&A function and write your question in the chat box. We will get to those at the end of the presentation. On behalf of APA Cleveland Section's leadership, we're really excited for this first of a series of webinars that we'll be having. We have a number of folks who are on our leadership team, including our section director, Amy Snell-Yost, as well as the others that you can see here. If you're interested in being part of that leadership team in the future, please let us know. We've been having some recent section meetings and events. If you were able to attend, we're really excited that you've gotten to do so. We recently had our APA Ohio Advocacy Day with state legislators to talk about efforts at the state level to improve both development, regulations, zoning, and housing. We also recently partnered with Cleveland Metro Parks for a waterfront edge design guidelines meeting to discuss that program. If you have not yet received any emails from APA Cleveland section, please make sure that they are in your safe senders list. We have added a new Gmail account recently, apaclevelandoh@gmail.com. Check that. That will make sure that you are getting local news about APA Cleveland section. In terms of upcoming events, on September 12th, so next week, we are having our first planner social for the fall. That is at 6 p.m. at Brewdog in Cleveland. On October 22nd, we will have our second webinar series covering the topic of brownfields. That will also be via Zoom at 12 p.m. If you've not yet signed up for OKI's Regional Planning Conference in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that is scheduled for the November 20th date. We'll also be looking for a number of other events, so keep your eye on that email address. One of them is a Cleveland form-based code presentation to learn about the City of Cleveland's recent form-based code adoption, as well as a river cleanup and kayak session. So that's pretty exciting if you want to get out on the water. But to our session at hand today, I am very excited to introduce our speaker, Patrick Grogan-Myers. Patrick is the current Planning and Development Director for the City of Euclid. He has a decade of experience in housing and community development and previously held positions with the cities of Maple Heights and University Heights. He has experience setting up and running housing programs, and he has established plans to overcome the challenges of attracting market rate and affordable housing projects to communities he's worked in. He is a graduate student in the Maxine Goodman Levin College of Urban Affairs, focused on affordable housing development and public transit access in shrinking regions. And we're so excited for Patrick to be joining us today. So with that, I do also want to thank our co-sponsor for this, the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission. This is available for CM credits, so that number is on the screen and will be available afterward as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Patrick to discuss housing revitalization in Euclid. Patrick?
Great. Thank you, Patrick. And let me make sure, so hopefully you can see the presentation now.
Looks great.
Looks good. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that warm welcome. And I really hope to be able to live up to that. Again, Patrick Grogan-Myers with the City of Euclid. I have the distinct honor and privilege to serve as the Planning and Development Director for the City of Euclid, and having served in now, this is my third inner ring suburb of Cleveland. It truly is amazing how many facets that we all share together. And I think that's something that's really important as I kick this off, is just there are so many pieces that my goal is you're able to take away, whether you're serving in Cleveland, you're serving somewhere else in the county, wherever you are, there are so many commonalities that we have from community to community. So my hope is that there's a takeaway for everyone here, and certainly trying to draw on my experience in multiple communities. The other piece, just to kick everything off, is I sit here giving this presentation, but in no way, shape, or form can take any or all of the credit for the work that's being done. This is done by a team of people here in Euclid, and certainly I learned from people who came before me here in Euclid, but also in other communities that I've served in. So that's why we do these things. That's why we do these webinars, is to learn from each other, because so much of it is really just making sure that we have the tools we need in our respective communities. And so I just hope to be able to share something that we're doing here that can benefit you wherever you're serving. So just to start off with a little bit of background on Euclid, I figure most people probably know, if nothing else, for that dreaded Euclid case related to zoning. But in case you don't know, Euclid has a long storied history that dates back to the early days of when Moses Cleveland came to survey the Western Reserve. I won't go into all of that. There's a well-researched book out there by a Euclid resident pulling all that history together. So for the purposes of the conversation today, the village was established in 1903 and grew to such a size that it became a city in 1931. So a quick growth for Euclid. And again, it's an east side inner ring suburb of Cleveland. And interesting fact, it is the only inner ring suburb to also border a neighboring county, which absolutely has bearing in our conversation around housing revitalization. Euclid is also fortunate to have two primary natural assets, Lake Erie to the north, and for any geologists in the room, we have the Portage Escarpment and the Euclid Creek to the south. In the map, the Google image snap, you'll see the bright, the dark green evergreen line running parallel to Euclid Avenue towards the southern portion of the city. It's essentially a significant elevation change in a short distance. So it's a significant geologic characteristic of the city. And again, it's interesting how geology and geography all impact the conversation that we're having today, and all a part of, because they've definitely shaped the city's development history. And just as another example, in many of the homes around Lake Erie on the northern side of the city along Lakeshore Boulevard were originally built as vacation cottages around the turn of the century. That means that they weren't designed originally to be housed during the winter. So a lot of them don't have great insulation, didn't have double pane windows or double hung windows. And so it's interesting how that all comes to bear when we talk about housing here in the city. And so it's always just fascinating to me, a city's development or geologic patterns and how we live with them 100 plus years later. Euclid's economic asset is a strong industrial base. And so outlined in yellow is our industrial core, as we call it, that has been present from the founding of the village to today. Companies like Chase Brass, General Electric, and TRW had major manufacturing operations in Euclid. And even today, we still have major operations like Lincoln Electric, Eaton, PPG, and Amazon who employ thousands of people here today in the city still. The industrial base was driven by the presence of a railroad line. And so we see that today running parallel to the Interstate 90. But in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, those rail lines that ran along the similar corridor were the hub of economic activity, and really what drove people to start moving to Euclid to be closer to jobs or start a business here that would play off of that rail connection. You can see just to the left portion in Collinwood, you have the rail yards in Collinwood as well. That all, again, factors into the development pattern and why people started moving to the city of Euclid many, many years ago. And as always, in many of our communities, the development path, whether it's the railroad or then subsequently the interstate, that development path shapes the economic, social, racial, and housing landscape of today. So we're having to overcome the barriers that an elevated highway and railroad present in creating two halves of a city, the economic and social justice initiatives that we need to undertake to recognize not only that there are differences in housing quality, in housing type and tenure across the city, but how they're influenced by the railroad and the interstate. So just continuing briefly, as is typical for most of our inner ring suburbs here in Cuyahoga County, our population exploded in the post-World War II years. We hit our peak in 1970 at just over 71,000 people. And since that time, with the exception of 2020, we have been losing population. We are proud to say that we gained 600 residents between 2010 and 2020, but recognizing that by and large, the growth of the 1950s, 60s, 70s is most likely not coming back. So how do we address that as we look to build a built environment going into the future? The other element, and very much corresponds to the population component, is the age of the housing stock. So 60% of our housing stock is older than, dates back to before 1960, so it's 75 years of age or older. Very similar to Cuyahoga County, this is pulled from our master plan. Thank you to the County Planning Commission for pulling this graphic together. And while the overall percentage is roughly the same as Cuyahoga County, our decades are a little bit different. And so that poses different challenges when we talk about housing and housing revitalization here in the city of Euclid. So the first step when I started back in 2022 was really on a listening session with all of our departments, all of our team members, to try to understand some of the challenges that we have ahead of us. There was a lot of crystal clear understanding that our population, 20% of our population is 60 plus, and many are retired, so they're on fixed incomes. Household median income, while it increased by, I believe it was about 7%, we're still at $45,000, and there's a high cost burden. 38% of our households in the city are paying 30% or more of their income towards housing costs. And when you break that down further, 22% of owner-occupied households and 50% of rental households are paying more than 30% towards housing costs. So while this may be in part due to the age of the housing, because it is 75 years of age or older, and certainly if anyone owns and loves a 75 plus year old house, I own and love begrudgingly sometimes a 135-year-old house. It comes with a lot of needs, and those needs are not cheap. And so certainly housing costs could be in part due to the age of the housing stock, but it could also be that other costs are just taking up a household's income, which may mean that there are home repairs or other essential investments in the housing that are not being made due to the high cost burden. So we've got a little bit of a potential chicken and egg issue here. And during those listening sessions, during those conversations, a couple things came out. One, in particular, with our housing division, there are a number of stuck properties. There are a number of properties that are trying to work through some challenges as far as maybe they've been cited and an owner has passed away, there's not a responsible owner to be found, or there's an owner who absolutely wants to make the investment, but they don't have the income or the savings to be able to make that investment. So how do we address that and make sure we're doing so in an equitable manner? The other piece is that there are numerous departments and divisions working on housing. And what was interesting through these conversations was how a lot of these departments and divisions weren't explicitly thinking about being in housing policy and assistance space, but they absolutely were touching a critical component of it. Whether it was our recreation department, where they were wondering why a youth participating in one of their programs wasn't continuing to participate because there was a housing issue at home, and that took precedent over a recreation program fee, or took precedent over an investment in a car repair, which then meant the youth couldn't participate in the program because the parent couldn't get the youth to the programming. From the seniors' perspective, we have part-time social workers who support our seniors, and they're focusing on how do we age in place, how do we do some estate planning, how do we make sure that your property taxes are paid, you're on homestead exemption, you're enrolled in that program through the county. And then certainly our work in property maintenance goes without saying, that's a critical part of housing. But then they were facing their own issue with stuck properties. And then here in planning and development, we have 4 divisions, and each one was addressing some portion of housing. So in economic development, our economic development manager oversees our property tax abatement program, which is largely used for new construction and substantial additions to the homes. Community development oversees the implementation of the approximately $1 million in community development block grant funds we receive every year. And a sizable portion, anywhere from 10 to 25% of those dollars every year, go towards housing programs. Our zoning division assists with the enforcement of the zoning code, but also works with property owners and investors who are looking to invest, whether it's new construction or additions. And then certainly, as many of us know sitting on the call, our planning division, which works on parks and streetscapes, as our planning manager holds meetings about, say, a park, it is hard to have a park meeting talking about playgrounds or some sort of improvement without a problem property nearby coming up. What are you going to do about the gutters falling off this house? This house is falling into disrepair. It's great you're making improvements in the park, but what are you doing about that property? So no matter what, a large portion of city government is touching housing and may not think of it that way. So that's a challenge we need to address as we talk about creating a consistent strategy and set of goals for housing revitalization. So we really overcame this through the development of 3 strategies. And I can't resist myself. I had to make sure that each one of these 3 strategies followed an S once I started coming up with the words. But I think this will make sense as we go through step by step in each one of these. So first is really stabilizing neighborhood turnover. We heard as we were conversing with our school district, the high transitory nature of households here in Euclid, particularly in the rental market, is concerning because it has an impact on student success. There were a number of students that the schools were sharing with us where they were having students who were experiencing either 1, 2, 3 moves within one academic year, or potentially 1, 2, 3 moves within their elementary school period. And it may have been within the community or between communities here in Cuyahoga County. And that is an issue when we talk about setting students up for success. So stabilizing neighborhood turnover is really the first step kind of in our minds. But a close second and third, or shared first priorities, if you will, support existing residents. We were hearing time and time again, going back to the demographic challenges, just that brief snippet I shared, making sure to support residents who were responsible, who do want to make improvements, who do want to stay in the community, but maybe don't have the resources to be able to do so. How do we support those residents? And then third, set the stage for new residents who are interested in moving into the community. Let me be clear, the strategies are not focused on pushing anyone out or pricing people out. We are very sensitive to that. We have heard Cleveland's conversation around property tax abatement. We are actively looking at that and focusing on the data to support sensible strategies and sensible policies that prevent that. But the goal of our strategy is to ensure that Euclid remains a great place to live, work, and raise a family. And it's a community that's open to all, regardless of income, background, nationality, whatever the case may be. But in this conversation, we focus particularly on income. We want to make sure that Euclid is a place that's welcoming to all. So focusing first on that stabilization of neighborhood turnover. The first tactic we took was developing a property tax delinquency outreach letter campaign. It's a lot of words that basically says, when you're delinquent in your property taxes, you face the prospect of a tax foreclosure, which is costly to residents. And we weren't confident that this really represented just some bad actors or just kind of some of the other narratives we hear around landlords and whatnot. We weren't confident going into this that this fully represents what we were seeing. So, bottom line, there are just about 19,400 parcels in the city of Euclid. Beginning in 2022, the number of delinquent parcels was just about 2,300. Beginning in 2023, when we really started to implement some of these action items, 2,480 parcels were delinquent. That totaled 12.7% of parcels across the entire city. Going into 2024, that number is down to about 1,976 parcels. And then we have a projected beginning balance of 1,857 parcels delinquent at the start of 2025. The way we are working on this is really focusing on this outreach letter that starts a conversation with property owners who did not pay off their tax balance either in the most recent tax billing or going back a year. Really, that conversation started with the letter saying, we're not sure if you're aware of this, but you have a delinquent tax balance. And if something changed and you don't know what to do, what your next steps are, this is something that is beyond your reach at this point, give us a call. Let us be a resource and a help to you. Or if you're not aware of this and we're making you aware for the first time, here's the number to the county treasurer's office. Get on a payment plan to get caught up here. And in one case, we did have a woman call. It would have been just about the fall of last year. She reached out. We sent out a letter. She had missed the January and July payments for that year. And so we sent out a letter. And she gave me a call and she said, her first words out of her mouth, I said, "This is Patrick, how can I help you?" And she said, "I'm angry with you." I said, "Okay, that's familiar territory. What did I do? How can I help?" And she said, "You sent me a letter that said I didn't pay my taxes. And I know my civic duty. I pay my taxes. I pay every bill that comes in. I didn't receive a bill. How can you tell me I haven't paid my property taxes?" I pulled up the county record. I was talking with her. It turns out that she paid off her 15-year mortgage the fall of the previous year. And whether she should have filed or whether her mortgage company should have filed an update to her tax mailing address, it didn't get filed. The tax bills for January and July's payments last year were mailed out, and they didn't reach her. They went to her mortgage servicing company, who didn't forward them on to her. And so she sat vacant or sat delinquent. And we made her aware of this issue through the conversation. She immediately called the treasurer's office, figured out how to get it all paid. And it was a phenomenal success story, but it was a demonstration, as we were concerned about, that she was at risk of there being a tax foreclosure, incurring more costs, penalties, and interest. But ultimately, it was something as simple as she wasn't aware of the issue in the first place. And there were at least a half dozen other stories pretty similar to that we encountered through 2023, where that was the case. And so a simple, kind letter reaching out, just saying, "Hey, ultimately, this is something you should be aware of," is an important part of our strategy. Ultimately, 67 parcels completely paid off the delinquency, which totaled more than $240,000 in delinquency paid, and overall $317,000 was paid towards the delinquency in partial payments and payment plans. What I will say is, for the purposes of this conversation and from our perspective, the collection of the property taxes is not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to prevent people from going into tax foreclosure when it's something that could have easily been prevented with this letter campaign. 67 parcels paid off completely out of 269. That's just shy of 25%, who took care of it by just sending a 5-cent piece of paper with some, and then a 50-cent stamp on it. So it represented a very little bit of staff time and effort, and something that kept a potential turnover from happening. But what we were cognizant of as I was pitching this idea to Mayor Gale here in Euclid, as well as council, there was rightfully some skepticism. Why is the city doing this if 6.6% out of 6.6 cents out of every dollar of property taxes paid goes to the city? The city's receiving maybe about $1 million. What's the city's incentive to be involved in this conversation? And my argument, again, goes back to neighborhood turnover and trying to prevent 67 property owners from potentially going through tax foreclosure and having that property turned over. That impacts a capacity to build community between neighbors, and be able to support one another. And it has nothing to do, in my mind, with landlord tenant or property owner versus rental. It has more to do with, when we keep things stable, that allows families to stay in homes, whether they're owning or renting. Additionally, and somewhat relatedly, we ramped up our land reutilization program's ability to accept donations through the deed in lieu of foreclosure. So essentially, and you might know this as well, but if you don't, if you have a city land reutilization program, you can work in partnership with the county land bank to accept properties as deed in lieu of the tax foreclosure. So if the only lien they have on the property is the tax lien, and they're not interested in owning the property anymore, you can take that property into your land reutilization program, which, as I'll discuss later in the presentation, can be a really interesting tool for either infill housing development, or if it's a vacant home, a new affordable housing opportunity. And then the third strategy, which feels a little like the antithesis to the first portion of working the delinquent tax letter outreach campaign, is recommending stuck parcels to tax foreclosure. As we went through the full 2,480 parcels in the delinquency list starting in 2023, and we compared it to the properties that the housing division was bumping up against, they were having issues on and couldn't get resolve on. We found in the Venn diagram, there were a lot of parcels that overlapped here. And in a number of cases, they were properties that ultimately were maybe the property owner was deceased, and the kids didn't want to really address the property. They wanted to wash their hands of it. And if they had a mortgage or a HELOC, they needed to go through tax foreclosure to be able to get resolved in the situation. So being strategic and being deliberate in which properties were recommended to tax foreclosure was a strategic part of this, because it helped us resolve some of these problem properties and be able to get them into more responsible hands. The second piece of this is addressing housing cost burden. So we have done this through two funding vehicles. In 2021, we used CDBG CV dollars, just shy of about $340,000 to assist with rental and mortgage payments. So this was absolutely in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, to be able to assist tenants and people with mortgages who maybe had income issues as a result of a layoff or a lost job from the pandemic, providing that support through those CDBG CV funds. Earlier this year, the city also was awarded a contract of just shy of $840,000 to use home ARP funds for tenant-based rental assistance and supportive services. Again, our strategies cannot be alone dedicated to owner occupancy. The dedication is to neighborhood stabilization, first and foremost. And so making sure that we have robust rental assistance and supportive services is an important part of our strategy here. Moving into the second strategy around supporting existing residents. So in 2022, when I came in, the Heritage Park neighborhood, which is on the southwest side of the city of Euclid and borders the South Collinwood neighborhood, the Euclid Green neighborhood of Cleveland, running north of Euclid Avenue, between the Cleveland border and East 222nd Street. We were talking with the neighbors here, which tend to be a little bit older and more owner-occupied, and also overwhelmingly Black and minority households. And that absolutely has to do with a history of redlining. And so the community, the mayor and Ward 1 councilperson at the time were dedicated to having an in-depth conversation with the Heritage Park Community Association and residents in the area to say, what is going on? How can we be a partner in assisting you in keeping your neighborhood stable, particularly in light of the Great Recession, which they were still absolutely suffering the impacts of, as 12% of the single and two family housing units were demolished in this one neighborhood, just as in the wake of the Great Recession. But those ongoing meetings with the residents and the community association, they really described how they were rich enough to not qualify for the CDBG means tested programs, but were too poor or still underwater on their mortgage to obtain conventional financing. So, in talking and working with the residents, we built a pilot grant program. We had never operated something like this based on staff knowledge, but certainly it could go back decades since the city had operated a grant program like this, if ever. We set aside $300,000 to build this grant program that offered $7,500 per household for street visible exterior home repairs. Single and two family owner occupied properties were eligible. And we ultimately funded this using $200,000 in the city's ARPA allocation and $100,000 in county ARPA match to be able to build this program. And it was administered by CHN Housing Partners. Ultimately, 36 homes were able to have projects completed, with the largest set of projects focused on roof and driveway replacements. And here are just some of the projects. Again, roof and driveway were our biggest things, but they are big ticket items. And when you look at the life of these two types of projects, it's not uncommon for these to last between 10 and 20 years. And for a lot of these residents, that is the difference of they were working at the time and generating an income versus now they're retired and they're working on a fixed income. So these are two great examples of properties that were beautified, that were improved as a result of this. And when you go through and you look at 36 homes, that's more than 10% of the housing that is in the neighborhood right now. And so when you see a new driveway, a new roof, new windows, new gutters, a property was painted, it really has a tremendous impact because of the size and focus of the neighborhood that we zeroed in on. We then took this grant pilot program and expanded it starting this year to allow it to serve citywide. And it operates under the new name Neighborhood Opportunity Grant, because we're really, again, focusing on creating opportunity within the neighborhood rather than trying to replace opportunity with new housing. We want to focus on, under this strategy, supporting existing residents. The program is administered by Euclid Development Corporation, which is the city's nonprofit CDC, known as EDCOR. And $15,000 of this $390,000 program budget goes towards administrative costs, with $375,000 going towards grants. Similar program stipulations, $7,500 per household. Exterior street facing type projects are eligible. Single, two family owner occupied properties are eligible. And ultimately 50 grants if all properties take the $7,500 are eligible based on the funding. The change we implemented here was a 10% match was required. In talking with the Heritage Park residents, they were very appreciative of the $7,500 when we asked them, would you be able to contribute a match if we do this program again? They said yes. And so we expanded that as a trial for this year to learn from the previous program. And that has not been an issue. And what's been interesting is people have been more than willing to put in maybe a 15 or 20% match to be able to get a full driveway replacement or get a roof and windows done as part of the project. So it's been a very interesting learning project for us. But EDCOR also sought matching funds through the county's Community Development Supplemental Grant Program, and they were awarded $50,000 to add to the pot of funds. So that $390,000 program budget is actually $440,000, with $425,000 being able to contribute to grants. And these are just, again, driveways and roofs are a common theme here in some of the projects that have been awarded grants and have moved forward. And what was really interesting, unsolicited, this is some feedback from one of the residents who was awarded a grant, and just talking about how they were able to make great investment in their aging home. Every applicant has recognized the age is a part of the conversation, and creates the need for some of these larger improvements that need to be made. And specifically, what I thought was important was the resident talks about how it's easier to keep up the housing now because there are different projects that have been completed around the home, which is really important. Another program that EdCore offers that's been really important to this conversation and how the grant supplements is the low interest loan program. So it's administered by EdCore. It's been administered for 12 or 13 years now by EdCore. Or no, excuse me, this has been administered going back decades. They also have a down payment assistance program that has been administered for 12 or 13 years at this point. The low interest loan offers a 3% loan up to $24,000 to assist with home repairs and additions. Now, it is a means tested program based on household income, but year to date, they have approved 11 loans totaling just shy of $229,000. And this is up from, I believe it's 5 last year. So this is, a doubling of the amount of loans in addition to the grants. So it's important that we're trying to provide as many resources as possible to assist residents. This is just a brief breakdown of the home improvement projects to date through the loans. Multiple, you'll notice if you add all those up, it doesn't equal 11. It's because in some cases, they were able to accomplish 2 or 3 different styles of projects as part of their loan. But what's interesting is how the loan has skewed more towards plumbing, windows, and then some electrical shows up in there, HVAC shows up in there. It's interesting to see how the loans have allowed people to do some different projects that maybe weren't permitted or not possible given the grant support that was offered. So again, our focus has been try to provide this umbrella of programs to support existing residents. And this is on top of our CDBG home repair housing programs. We have a roof repair program, siding repair and replacement, as well as painting for aluminum siding. So those programs dovetail with this existing canopy of or umbrella of programs. And then the third piece is really setting the stage for new residents. So over the last 4 years, we are proud to have seen 21 new homes completed and another 5 currently underway. But what we recognize is the need to continue diversifying our housing stock in tenure, type, and style to meet the broader range of stages in a family's life cycle. Meaning we want someone who maybe grew up here or moved here. We want to be able to support them when they buy their first home, if they start in a rental unit, which is a very common story we hear from residents. I moved to the city and I started renting a property, an apartment or a house, and it allowed me to get a feel for the community and where I wanted to live in Euclid. And then I bought my first house here. I raised my family here, and then at some point, in some cases, residents may want to age in place, or they may want to move to a smaller footprint home. So we need to make sure that we are providing various housing styles to allow for rental or owner occupied, and then the various types of 2-floor living, single floor living. Do you need 2 or 3 bedrooms, or do you need a 4-bedroom home? Making sure we have different types of housing stock to meet that need. What I want to be clear on is our goal is not to be everything to everyone, but we want to have a little cross section of as many housing styles as possible. We're not trying to be a McMansion suburb. We leave that to other communities. And that's okay. That's a genuine place that people can live in for their housing stock. But the way we look at it is, if you look at your retirement portfolio, I hope that you're not all invested in Apple, You're not all invested in one company. The goal is to have a diversified portfolio so that if tech is doing really well, but pharmaceuticals aren't, or whatever the industries aren't, they all balance out. We don't want to be over leveraged or over concentrated in one style of housing or in just owner occupied or just rental. We need a good balance because as the economy changes, we need to make sure that we're able to change with it, and also maintain that diversity so that as residents need to move through their life cycle, they can remain close to their social networks, to their faith communities, to their families. We need to maintain all of that. And so, how do we do that? The first is we propose updates to our planning and zoning code. So, our zoning code was adopted in 1922. Certainly, planning classes have probably taught you that, no doubt, with the Ambler Realty case. And certainly the code has been updated numerous times. I lost track when I tried to count how many times it's been updated in the 102 years since it was adopted. But what ultimately resulted, it was various code sections are either unclear, they conflict with one another, or are just generally not user-friendly. Because they were, as updates were drafted, they were only focusing in on one or two sections of the code and not the entire code itself. So the other piece is the zoning code did not reflect the current built environment, which maybe is not a bad thing, depending on the situation. But the bigger thing is it didn't reflect the desired development patterns from our 2018 master plan. So for those who don't know, for Suburbs Development Council, Jennifer Kuzma has absolutely been a guiding star in this effort, partnered with Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, Patrick Hewitt and the team, to review all 19 member communities' zoning codes back in 2021. And I commend them for, it's a lot of reading. There are times where I don't enjoy reading our zoning codes, so to read 19 member communities' zoning codes is really an uphill battle, but they did it. And they really identified opportunities for improvement. And they also undertook a survey of housing developers to understand what barriers there were to housing development. Now, unsurprisingly, the housing developers said zoning codes and approvals processes are two higher priority barriers to infill housing development. Now, this didn't come as a surprise to most of us in the first suburbs who were engaged in this conversation. We knew that there were some issues. We knew there were some opportunities for greater clarification on design guidelines. Matt Madsey in Berea has an excellent example of this. If you're looking for some best practices, I really commend Berea and Matt. And it's really an opportunity for us all to learn. But that was something that came through was, developers felt like if you were going to ARB, it was, a 50-50 shot on whether or not you were going to be approved. And what were the things that they were going to nitpick and what were the things they were going to let slide. There were other elements of the code analysis that was a learning experience for us. 77% of lots do not meet current code requirements for minimum average lot width. 31% of homes do not meet current minimum living area requirements, and 18% of homes do not meet current front yard setback requirements. So basically, in short, if you took a typical post-war bungalow here in Euclid, you knocked it down, you tried to rebuild the exact same home on that lot, you would likely not be able to do so without obtaining several variances. That's just not efficient. And that doesn't meet with what the development patterns and goals are that were outlined by the community back in 2018 in our master plan. And there are a number of times when I talk to housing developers today, especially if they're not familiar with Euclid, they ask what zoning code chapters or sections should they look at, or can I provide them that relate to their proposed project? I have to hand them no less than 3 chapters of text and potentially more, depending on their concept. So that's a challenge. That's not user-friendly. So the city and Cuyahoga County Planning Commission partnered to review our zoning code, review common variance requests that were made over the past several years, and propose updates based on staff recommendations. It's taken about 18 months. It's been a lot of hard work, but ultimately The Planning and Zoning Commission last month recommended updates to City Council, and last night the proposed ordinance had its first of 3 readings as required by our charter. Among those changes are putting all the use, height, and area regulations into one chapter for each zoning district rather than spreading them out across 3 chapters, updating definitions to 21st century standards. And certainly we will have to continue looking at uses. We still contemplate tanneries and cattle farms and everything else in our zoning code, so we need to update some of those uses. But in this example code, we're updating definitions, expanding permitted uses in the previously named U1 single family and U2 two family districts to allow a little bit more flexibility for different types of housing that may not have been permitted previously, and allowing front setbacks to be flexible to match the existing built environment, eliminating just one of many potential variances that are needed in new housing development. The other piece that we had updated was the Land Reutilization Program Handbook. So we adopt a handbook that really spells out the expectations for developers when they are proposing a project. What are the project expectations? What's the financial capacity they need to prove? And what's the ability to deliver community goals? We need to create clear requirements in those applications. And that's what the update to the handbook did, was clarify all of that. So developers have clear expectations from the start of what they're needing to deliver to the community, not just some housing, but some broader community goals here. It also set the price for land bank parcels at $750 for new residential construction, pending conditions we put on the terms of the sale. But it also gave us flexibility for a weak market area, so to be defined, so that parcels could be sold for $1 for new residential construction in weak market areas, so in tougher to develop areas. So we wanted to make sure that we maintain a land reutilization program that could be flexible to the various environments and local submarkets here in Euclid. And then I want to be sensitive to time, but I think this one's really important. We created Open Door Euclid, which is a new program modeled off of a Slavic Village program and a Maple Heights program that I ran when I was in Maple Heights. It takes tax delinquent properties and turns them into affordable home opportunities. In conversations with businesses here in Euclid, one of the things we were hearing, the challenge they have is finding housing for people to be able to be employed in Euclid and live nearby. Certainly maintaining a car, the cost of car repairs and everything else makes it a challenge where employees were having to make a decision on whether or not to catch the bus. Sometimes the bus would be late, they'd show up late for work, and it created performance issues or discipline issues. So employers asked, how can we get employees to be closer to work? And there's a lot of employees who do want to be closer to their job. So this is administered by the city's Community Improvement Corporation, and it sells homes between $15,000 and $20,000, allowing buyers to put in either sweat equity or hire contractors to fix up property. Where we can't sell the home to a owner-occupant, then we will sell it to an investor who will take that property, invest in it, and then sell it to an owner-occupant. So one brief example, we had this property on East 252nd Street. This poor property had a tree fall into the front of it. They needed to re-roof the whole property. They had to tear off part of the front wall to stabilize the wall. It was a mess inside. Water had been coming in it. It had been vacant for years. It had $38,000 in delinquent property taxes. The investor in total pulled the permits, brought the property up to code, and invested approximately $55,000 to $60,000 in it. This is the property as it stands today. Actually, it is being closed on today for an owner-occupant to move into the property. It was sold for, it was under contract at least for $88,000. I think the success story in this is that when the developer began working on the property, the neighbors were coming out and just thanking the investor for putting love into this property. And then they were even happier when they heard the investor say, and we have to sell it to an owner-occupant and we're trying to create something of a quality, affordable housing here in Euclid. And so really this was something that brought the community out in support of this property and this new homeowners coming into a community that's already excited to have them join the community. Um, but the other success in this is a side-by-side, separately owned double house. The owner to the right, when you're looking at this photo with the green awning that's been cut out a little bit, that property owner had not invested in that property in years. The minute this property transferred and they started seeing work happening on this property, they've stepped up their game and have invested, have cleaned up that property and started putting money into that property next door, which is only better for the neighborhood. And they will maintain their property as a rental and maintain it for someone to come in and rent and have a quality house next door. So as I started all of this, what are some of the takeaways? And I tried to focus on what are some things that require little money to get going. I think no matter what, talk to other departments and divisions about how they interact with housing. It may surprise you and it may even surprise them. They're not thinking it's housing related. They're just addressing someone who's at the window. They're addressing a senior citizen concern. Whatever the case may be, have that conversation because there's probably a great opportunity to build some of these strategies together. Whether you are an entitlement community or you are applying for CDBG funds, be creative with what you do with those funds and invest funds in projects that pay you back. I am a firm believer in, while you can put in new roads with CDBG funds, I think there are more creative uses for CDBG funds that can pay you back, whether it is delivering on a broader community goal or it's something related to increased property values from a park project, or turning around a property that is just in dire straits somewhere in a neighborhood in your community. Housing programs can be self-supporting. So in Maple Heights, one of the things that we did was use land bank sales and other property sales to create a funding source for grant programs. So whenever we sold those properties, the next year we would budget the revenues from those sales into the grant program that was set up there. So I think look at those creatively and figure out how to have them be self-supporting, because it is possible. And then use those funds to leverage other grant dollars that are out there. I think another piece when you're looking at infill housing is look at your fees and processes. You don't need to go through a full zoning code rewrite to look at your fees and look at your processes and make sure that they are as lean as possible, and are ultimately delivering the goals that your community has set out. I think so many times we like to have not convoluted, but involved processes, thinking that they're the only way we can deliver the community's goals. And I think what I've found in my experiences, that's not always the case. Sometimes a convoluted process is actually working against you in delivering the goals for the community. And also, finally, every community with a land reutilization program, you have an opportunity to take in properties for your own version of an Open Door Euclid program. You don't need to have high volume to have high impact. So, happy to talk offline more about this, because it certainly is an involved opportunity, but it's a great opportunity for you to impact your community and your neighborhoods. So with that, I know I'm a little over time, but happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was fascinating and shows the level of work that you've put in to improve housing in Euclid. So thank you for that. We do have a couple folks who have asked questions. For folks who may not have typed in a question yet, you can use that Q&A function at the bottom and type a question in, and we'll see if we can't get it answered. One of the questions that I had was really about the national conversation around NIMBYism and YIMBYism that's been happening in a community like Euclid, where maybe not much new housing has been built in the last few decades. You're now seeing some new housing investments. What has been the reaction of folks? Has there been any concern about NIMBYism locally?
So what we have purposely steered clear of the NIMBY YIMBY nomenclature, and really tried to focus on what are the day-to-day experiences of Euclid residents, regardless of owner or rental. Talk to us about what your day-to-day experience looks like. And it has led to some candid, but also heartbreaking conversations when we talk about the national statistics, or the census data that ultimately allows us to talk about, the 30% housing cost burden. When people are able to convey their day-to-day lived experience, that is the way to overcome, I think, these boogeymen that are out there about, NIMBY and YIMBY. There have been some really great community conversations around that. So yes, there are absolutely some concerns when you talk about new housing. What does that impact? What's the impact on me and my experience in the neighborhood? But we also talk about the opportunity for new families to move into the community, and that's really been a powerful conversation point for residents. I'm not going to say we've figured out some sort of magic wand to avoid the NIMBY YIMBY conversation, but I'll say that when we root it in the lived experience of people here in Euclid or people who want to move to Euclid, that's really what allows people to start seeing past their biases, um, and really participate in a conversation that allows us to get to what do you want to see in the community for the future.
Awesome. We do have a question from Kyle. Uh, how did you obtain the data about the percent of residents whose housing expenses exceed 30% of their income?
It used to be the American Fact Finder. I don't know what they call it nowadays, but it is through the Census Bureau. So there is a financial characteristics table that is made available through the Census Bureau that gives a breakdown based on income level and then what percent of income is being spent based on the housing costs that are being spent on by the household. So happy to shoot some more details over, but that is available through the American Fact Finder financial characteristics table.
I fully expected you to know the exact web link on that one, knowing you, Patrick. But
I don't know the
okay,
table number, so I apologize for that, but I
there
know
you
it's
go.
called financial characteristics.
Another question was from Quinton. Does the City of Euclid provide any pre-development services or counseling to assist emerging developers who want to complete infill projects in the neighborhood?
So we don't offer anything directly. So as far as development assistance, we work hand in hand with the county land bank on their construction gap financing program. As far as kind of the capacity building end of things, there's nothing formal, but I would say that that is one of the largest bits of time I spend in my week when I work on housing programs, and infill housing development is working with developers to coach up. We have several small developers, and minority developers that we are absolutely trying to help them build up their operations. And they've started, one developer in particular was doing one home a year, and he was doing a lot of the work. He was acting as general contractor. And then he's now undertaking 3 homes this year because we really focused on coaching up. How are you, working through the permitting process? What are some resources? Who are some people you can connect with to get your architectural plans taken care of, get you through the building process? So most of it is just kind of me spending the time building up those developers because it's important. That's the way we build the pipeline for more housing in the future.
Fantastic. Well, we are just about running out of time. I want to say thank you again on behalf of the APA Ohio Cleveland section to Patrick Grogan-Myers, Planning and Development Director for the City of Euclid, for the fantastic presentation today. Thanks to Kevin Leeson from the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission for assisting in the background as well. A couple quick reminders, this is available for CM credits. If you have any questions, you can email us. We'll be able to get that number for you. Upcoming events include September 12th, the Planner Social at 6 p.m. at Brewdog, October 22nd, webinar series on brownfields, and November 20th, the OKI Regional Planning Conference in Fort Wayne. This presentation will be posted on YouTube in the future. If you would like the slides, please email us and we'll be able to send them out to you. Patrick, thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a good day.